It was 9 a.m. on the dot, with only 10 minutes to go. Joseph Hazelwood, the captain of the Exxon Valdez, looked up at the huge ship in front of him. In the middle of a vast ocean, this giant oil tanker was now his responsibility. Looking from the pier to the harbor, he watched the crew board the ship. Some moved slowly, as if it were just another day, while others hugged their families for the last time. The long voyage of nearly 2 weeks would take each of them into an unknown future. Entering the port office, Hazelwood signed documents confirming that he had taken control of the Exxon Valdez, loaded with 53 million gallons of crude oil. After completing his official business, he boarded the giant ship. As soon as he stepped on deck, the sound of sirens filled the air as he took one last look at the Alaskan landscape. The ropes were thrown over, the doors closed, and the Exxon Valdez started her giant engines and set sail at 0912. The harbor was left behind, the land slowly fading from view. This voyage to California would be both a mission and a test for the entire crew. The hours just kept on passing, and before we knew it, it was midnight. The sky was cloaked in darkness, and the sea was tossed by wild waves. As the waves gently kissed the hard hull of the Exxon Valdez, Captain Hazelwood was quite comfortable inside. He was watching the scene, which he was used to from his past voyages, over the bottle of cognac he had brought with him, and he was quite enjoying it. He had even opened the bottle of wine he had been saving to celebrate the successful voyage, and he was enjoying it immensely. The captain thought it would be a great idea to get a new one from the port. Meanwhile, he was checking his logbook to make sure he was on the right track. When he saw the iceberg warnings, he remembered that the radar had been acting up for a while. He quickly steered the ship to a safer angle. As the Exxon Valdez cut through the dark waves, this quick thinking saved the ship and millions of gallons of oil on board from a potential disaster. But as they say, nothing is as simple as it seems. Captain Hazelwood kindly handed the ship over to the crew and retired to his cabin. Abel Seaman, the assistant captain who took over, picked up the logbook lying on the floor and began to examine it with a warm smile. Just below the iceberg warning, another note caught his eye. It was about the dangerous reefs of Bly Island. Every word he read made his heart start to pound a little faster. When he realized that these reefs were in position, he jumped up in a state of panic. Oh, it was too late. In the darkness, the lights of Bly Island shone brightly. Abel steered the ship as hard as he could to the left, but unfortunately, he just couldn't steer the Exxon Valdez away from those big reefs. The poor ship was jolted with a sharp shake, followed by a loud creak. The poor ship just couldn't take the sharp rocks of the reef despite the thin steel walls under the hull. The poor ship. Its oil-filled tanks ruptured, and millions of gallons of oil began to leak into the ocean. As the morning sun came up, it was a pretty scary sight. The beautiful blue ocean was covered in a layer of black oil, which formed around the ship. The poor Exxon Valdez was stuck on the reefs, unable to move. As the poor crew waited for help, they began to realize just how big the oil spill was. This was to be one of the biggest man-made environmental disasters in history. It was a truly heartbreaking event. So how did this disaster happen? Firstly, one of the main causes was human error. It turns out that Captain Joseph Hazelwood was drunk at the time of the incident. This caused him to become insensitive to warnings and sail towards a dangerous reef. But it wasn't just the captain's fault. Exxon's management failures were also very important. The tanker's radar system was not working properly, and there were serious flaws in Exxon's safety protocols. Lack of training and continued negligence prevented this disaster from being averted. The Exxon Valdez was in fact a preventable disaster. Had more robust safety measures and technology been in place, the tragedy might not have happened. In the aftermath, new global maritime safety standards were introduced. Tankers were required to be collision resistant, and new technologies have been developed to clean up oil spills effectively. However, management weaknesses cannot be ignored. Exxon's management approach at the time did not take the necessary steps to prevent the accident. Environmental and economic impacts. Prince William Sound, once a pristine wilderness, was profoundly affected by the Exxon Valdez oil spill. The disaster caused widespread damage to wildlife, killing some 250,000 seabirds, 3,000 otters, 300 seals, 250 bald eagles, and 22 killer whales. The spill also likely contributed to the collapse of salmon and herring fisheries in the early 1990s, leaving many fishermen bankrupt and severely damaging the economies of small coastal towns such as Valdez and Cordova. Economic losses from the spill were estimated at $2.8 billion, while environmental damage continued for years. A 2001 study found that more than half of the 91 beach sites tested in Prince William Sound still showed signs of oil contamination. The spill wiped out an estimated 40% of the region's sea otter population, which didn't recover to pre-spill numbers until 2014, 25 years later. Meanwhile, herring stocks, once a major source of income for local fishermen, have yet to fully recover. In the months following the Exxon Valdez oil spill, more than 11,000 Alaskans joined Exxon employees and federal responders in the cleanup effort. Exxon spent approximately $2 billion on the cleanup and an additional $1.8 billion on habitat restoration and compensation for personal injuries caused by the spill. Cleanup crews used a variety of methods, including skimming oil from the surface of the water, applying oil dispersant chemicals to the water and shoreline, washing oiled beaches with hot water, and rescuing and cleaning oiled animals. To assess the effectiveness of the cleanup methods, environmental officials deliberately left some areas of the coastline untreated. This approach revealed that while high-pressure hot water washing was effective at removing oil, it caused additional ecological damage by destroying the remaining plants and animals. One such untreated site, Mearns Rock, became the focus of a long-term study. Scientists have returned to the rock every summer since the spill, documenting the recovery of mussels, barnacles, and seaweed. They found that these species returned to normal levels within 3 to 4 years of the spill. Oil Pollution Act of 1990. Following the Exxon Valdez oil spill, the U.S. Congress passed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush later that year. The legislation increased penalties for companies responsible for oil spills and required all oil tankers operating in U.S. waters to be double-hulled. The Exxon Valdez, a single-hull tanker, did not have this safer design, a double-hull design, which reduces the likelihood of oil spills in the event of a collision, could have prevented the disaster. The Exxon Valdez, commissioned in 1986, was repaired and returned to service a year after the catastrophic spill, operating in another ocean under a new name. Under new regulations, the single-hulled ship was banned from carrying oil in US waters. It was reassigned to Europe, where such tankers were still allowed, and renamed several times, including Exxon Mediterranean, Sea River Mediterranean, and finally, SR Mediterranean. In 2002, the European Union banned single-hull tankers, so the former Exxon Valdez was reassigned to Asian waters. Exxon sold the ship in 2008 to a Hong Kong-based company, which converted it into an ore carrier and renamed it Dongfeng Ocean. In 2010, the vessel collided with another bulk carrier in the Yellow Sea and sustained significant damage. After the collision, the ship was again renamed Oriental Nicety. The ship's voyage ended in 2012 when it was sold to an Indian company for scrap and dismantled. The Exxon Valdez disaster affected not only Exxon, but the entire world. But the most important consequence was the introduction of new and stricter environmental safety standards. Today, the lessons learned from that disaster have made shipping safer, but we cannot stop there. We must learn from every disaster and build a better future. Exxon Valdez showed us that a major environmental disaster caused by human error could have been prevented. The Exxon Valdez disaster affected not only Exxon but the entire world. But the most important consequence was the introduction of new and stricter environmental safety standards. Today, the lessons learned from that disaster have made shipping safer. But we cannot stop there. We must learn from every disaster and build a better future. Exxon Valdez showed us that a major environmental disaster caused by human error could have been prevented.